My question is about administrative staff cuts throughout the government and what impact you see them having. So do you see impact to your staff?
So, I mean, I mentioned earlier the Social Security law and how, now that it's law, it still requires the Social Security staff to crunch it together and make it work. And again, they were subjected to a hiring freeze, on day one, which again, they have, slots to fill if you go to them now. But the bigger picture is that, when the president was sworn in, and again, the budget director, Russell Voigt, and a number of his, advisors, they have been targeting the federal workforce well before coming into office. Again, the notion that there's a deep state and that people aren't, even though they're civil service and professional, that they don't cooperate, they don't help the administration. So, as some of you know, I mean, federal employees have been getting flooded with these buyout offers from DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which again, no one knows exactly where the legal authority is to do that, because it's proposing to basically give people like a financial package as part of the buyout that's there. But they also are changing definitions of who's political and non-political. They're really pushing to basically fill positions that today are civil service positions with partisan employees that's there. The Pendleton Act, and as I said, you got to kind of really dust off the history books here right now, but in the 1880s, the Pendleton Act was passed to basically prohibit or to establish a nonpartisan civil service in the federal government. Again, it was just, horrible experience of cronyism and corruption and all this stuff that was going on there. And then basically they just said, we're going to change the system and have a professional civil service. And as I said, the lawsuits are going to keep coming. And I think the Pendleton Act is going to be something you're going to be reading about and hearing about in terms of making sure that that we have people who really are focused in terms of just the the mechanics, the blocking and tackling of their job. So this morning's Washington Post has a story where the acting Treasury Secretary, who had been in place until the new nominee was just confirmed, Mr. Bissett, he just resigned, that he's leaving. And the reason is that DOGE had been reaching out to the Treasury Department because they wanted access to the department's basically personnel and beneficiary computer bank or whatever. I mean, which basically probably is everybody in this room is in the Treasury system that's there. It is a computer program that has very limited access in terms of who can actually enter it, and he refused. And Elon Musk wasn't happy. And you can read all about it, in the story this morning. But I mean, there's another example of just where norms are really being tested right now in terms of stuff that we all always took for granted in terms of just how agencies run and how our own privacy protections are guarded by the federal government.
Quick question. I know Dr. Miriam Delphin-Rittman was the Assistant Secretary for SAMHSA. She just resigned at the end of the last administration. And I'm wondering if you're hearing, as an agency that really receives a lot of the benefit of the funding and the programming and the policy in that department, what are you hearing are the priorities for an incoming SAMHSA administration?
We have to see who the secretary of HHS is going to be that's going to be in charge of SAMHSA. And obviously, the hearing for Robert Kennedy could sell popcorn to watch the hearing that was there. And, obviously it will be going in a very different direction. And, we'll see how that shakes out. I actually think he's going to struggle in terms of getting confirmed.
Is there any movement to eliminate executive orders? I mean, I read the Constitution occasionally. I don't see any justification for any of them.
No, I think that's a really good question, and frankly, the pardon process is another one that I think has raised eyebrows. And actually on both sides of the aisle in terms of just, if you look at the pardon process in Connecticut, there's a much different system in terms of, victim input, screening, getting, real, and the pardon process just sort of happens, like, with a snap of the fingers that's there. I mean, executive orders have been around for a while. I mean, the Emancipation Proclamation by Abraham Lincoln, that was an executive order, okay? And so, but I think the use has definitely gone up. And frankly, that's where the checks and balances of our system really is so important to sort of have the court step in. And, I think in an issue like we've just seen with the spending authority, just say, you can't use an executive authority for that purpose. And in the meantime, I'm sure defenders of the presidency, and they're strong, would probably say, trying to limit a president across the board would be, questionable constitutionally. So, but it's a good point, and obviously, this experience that we've been going through for the last 12 days, I think has, really kind of perked people's attention up about, at least the intent of how far executive orders are being exercised.
Speaking of executive orders, do you feel like there's any synergy in either the House or the Senate for any of these executive orders in particular, and ones that are of concern to you that might affect Connecticut specifically? So,
right now we're focusing pretty much on the executive orders that are causing problems for people, and obviously, the fact that we have the Attorney General now in just full, battle gear in terms of trying to, block some of those from going through. And, one thing, I sort of passed over really quickly, and people have been asking about it, was that, people have been asking, well, how can a president raise a tariff, by himself or herself, And the fact is that if you do the research on it, Congress kind of like delegated that authority by statute to give to presidents, decades ago. And in that moment, it was really after World War II where, the push to reduce tariffs was very strong, because a lot of people felt that tariffs were one of the reasons, that created, tension in Europe and other places, and caused headaches for the U.S. So I think when they delegated it, they just kind of felt like, tariffs are a thing of the past. Nobody's going to use those, anymore. And obviously, that's an example of one where I think, maybe we've really got to look at rebalancing, who gets to make that decision.
Thank you for coming. You're really on top of your game, Congressman.
Yeah.
I'm curious, it seems really interesting that it appears that we're going to have back-to-back secretaries of education from our home state, assuming, the confirmed. But is there any way we could take advantage of that as a state? Not to exploit it, but are there any advantages to have the possibility of two cabinet members from our state?
No, that's a really, striking, sort of point. And, so, the issue I think that Linda McMahon's going to run into is that, the administration has made a pretty strong commitment, and it was in their platform to abolish, the Department of Education. So, how she's going to sort of deal with that, she hasn't had her confirmation hearing yet, is really going to be sort of a, threshold question for a lot of people. I think, as people sort of get their heads into, abolishing a department, people are going to suddenly start realizing, what the Department of Education does. So in Connecticut, and an example I often use, and I'm going around visiting secondary schools and trade schools as part of the EB, job push, and the Perkins Grant program, which is distributed by the U.S. Department of Education, is one of the real funding, workhorses in terms of programs that are there. I was at a ribbon cutting at Westbrook High School and went up at Turtle Lot for some new welding booths for kids to train up as welders, and they'd get certified with their diploma when they graduate. It's increasing school attendance, by the way, having programs like that. But again, Perkins was a big part of making that a reality. EB actually contributed to both schools, both high schools, in terms of the equipment that they put in there. And, again, there's just countless other, really worthwhile programs that, maybe this will be at least a teaching moment for people about the fact that, I'm on the education committee, as Chris said, and, because I think when I look at my district and I look at our state, Bill O'Neill, the governor from many years ago, used to say, we're never going to mine coal or grow large commodity crops. Our state succeeds by what's between our ears. And investing in people, I think it's a nice thing, it's a positive thing, but it's actually a really important thing for a state like ours to succeed.
First, thank you very much for coming today. It's
Yeah.
been a great program. I get the sense, and I think that a lot of people do, that this feels very chaotic in the last few weeks, and that largely the country is on their back foot in reaction to all of this. And yet, if we look at like Project 2025, there kind of was a blueprint for it. And I wonder how it is that we may be preparing for the next 3 months and the next 6 months. It's not like we didn't know some of this was going to happen.
Having had the experience with Russell Voigt in the last administration and reading what he said about impoundment, one thing that my office did is we have been sending out notices to municipalities, nonprofits who had federal grants that were in the pipeline through earmarks or other competitive grants, and basically telling them you have got to step on the gas in terms of getting your paperwork in and getting these funds obligated, which is the best protection if there's going to be somebody who's going to try and claw them back. That's there, and frankly, there was a pretty good response locally. People really, kind of figured that they couldn't just kind of treat it with the normal sort of bureaucratic speed that's there. But I think most people really want to assume the best. And particularly when a new administration's taking forward. So I think a lot of people, I guess, the realization that we really have to have sort of, not just play the short game and react minute by minute, but a longer game in terms of just trying to make sure that we keep, moving forward as a country. Stability, which is kind of boring, is actually really important. And I frankly think it's important, but it's really important for business. It's important for the business community. One of the former ambassadors from Australia, this guy Kim Beasley, wonderful man, and we're really good friends. But he sent me I don't know if it was a Christmas card or a birthday card or whatever. But he said in the Anglican Church, in their prayer book, one of their prayers is to pray for quiet governance. Which I remember reading it thinking, that's a really weird thing to say at church. But actually, they were on to something there. So anyway, well, thank you all for being here today.